Hello, everybody. Monday morning for us here in the United States, Monday evening for those of you in Europe joining us. We got people from all around the world. I am here with my co-host, Matt Bressington out of the United Kingdom. Matt, what's going on, man? How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Eventful few games, a lot going on. Revealing, here, there, and everywhere. It's been another mad week. We're over halfway through. The deadline's coming up. Everything's getting sorted out, but playoffs around the corner as well. So I'm all over the shop.
We got a lot to talk about today, and you guys, if you are watching this, you'll notice that I am wearing a American flag shirt here. We were supposed to have a show on the 4th of July. I was going to wear this American flag shirt, and Matt was going to wear, Union Jack, a British flag there, but we didn't get that chance. But I'm wearing it today on Monday just to give a little shout out to the 4th of July of the United States of America, specifically because this show we are celebrating the United States' greatest export, our greatest gift to the world, American football. And that is what this show is all about. And that's why I'm rocking the American flag here to a belated 4th of July celebration and a celebration of our great sport, American football. What do you think of that, Matt?
I mean, my people lost, but I'm all right losing this one, I think. We got American football out of it. We could let's water under the bridge. I think we're all good now. 300 years later, 350 years later, I think we're all right. I can forgive, forget. I'm sure you can do the same thing with the UK. We're all good now.
Exactly, bro. We're all good now. So now we're just here to share the lovely sport of American football. Everybody in the chat, what's going on, guys? Michael, hello from Dusseldorf. Hello. Daniel, Mark Wilson, Helena. Welcome to the show. We got some games to talk about here, Matt. Let's dive on into it. You touched on it. Interesting week. Interesting week for sure. We had some interesting, strange things happen. We'll talk about those. But starting off with a historic rivalry, the Austrian Derby, the Vienna Vikings versus the Raiders T-Roll. This is a long-standing rivalry that has been pretty one-sided since these teams joined the ELF. And it seems to kind of stay that way. Matt, talk to me about this first game that kicked off the weekend for us.
I mean, Vienna, as you said, historically dominant in these games. They've been undefeated in ELF Austrian rivalries, which is weird because the Raiders won them in the previous league. So it's kind of a backwards situation. Big win for them. They looked very comfortable. I was kind of watching the whole game. I know it was quite close at halftime. It was 13-13. But never once did I feel like the Vikings were going to lose this. It just felt very like, we'll sort them out in the second half. It'll be fine. The run game was going. Holmes wasn't, he wasn't on a MVP form, but he was right. Serviceable. He was fine. And Cozy Perry, though, 3 interceptions. Not great, especially for a team that's quite, let's say, gung-ho on quarterbacks and how they have gone about that. The run game for them is still over 200 yards as a team on the run, so that's never been an issue. 60 that did come through Perry, so he can perform on the ground game. Torre still probably a lock at this point for Rookie of the Year. He's been incredible. But the defense, again, for Vienna stole the show for me. Benjamin Straight, 2 interceptions, a ton of pressure on Nkosi, forced the 3 turnovers for him. Like, they just look great overall as a defense. They locked down the Raiders, didn't give them much space to breathe at all. Like I said, it just felt very comfortable. It looked like the defense was holding up. The offense was like, we'll sort them out later. And then as the game progressed, we saw Vienna just kind of take control quite easily over the Raiders.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you touched on a Benjamin Straight. Well, I talked to Coach Callahan or Kalaikai a couple weeks ago, and he talked about how Ben Straight is one of the most underrated defensive backs in the league and one of the hardest hitting defensive backs. And he had 2 nice interceptions this week. But yeah, interesting, man. I touched on this for the past few shows, how the Raiders brought in Cozy Perry after their previous Vikings loss. And they were obviously hoping to put themselves in a position to finally beat the Vikings. They had 2 tune-up games against the Mercenaries, against the Dragons to kind of get Cozy Perry comfortable. And it didn't turn out the way that I think they were hoping for. 13 for 31. You touched on it, man. 3 interceptions in the most important game that he has played so far. Interestingly, though, man, they still kind of had a chance. T-Roll had more first downs. They had better third down efficiency. They ran more plays. They had more total yards, but the turnovers, 3 interceptions and 1 lost fumble to Vienna's 0 turnovers. Vienna protecting the ball, and the Raiders just not able to get past that purple wall, man.
Exactly, and it's kind of keeping them out of like playoff contention or realistic championship contention, because you've got they beat the Berlins, they beat the Hamburgs, so the kind of middle teams that they play against, and then they take a step up after building back a bit of momentum, and then they lose again. Like it's 2 steps up, 3 steps down. It's a massive momentum killer. They're going to be going if they do make the playoffs, which they still do have a good chance of doing. They're going to be like, well, we've already lost to these guys. We've already lost to this kind of level of competition. For me, they're outside the top 5 looking in. And they match up pretty well with these teams with this run game. Like this run game is spectacular. I'm not going to lie. They have a lot going on the backfield, and they do give problems for every single team inside the top 5 of the ELF in this playoff contention. But their defense is fine. The quarterback play is inconsistent. And Cozy, again, we mentioned it, I think, last week. He's been kind of, he's been all right. He's got 5 touchdowns, 5 picks, which is, pedestrian. He's got 52% accuracy, which is not good. He's been sacked a couple times. He looks very skittish in the pocket, I think is how I would describe it. He kind of makes some reads. He doesn't throw the ball out. He doesn't try and put the ball in tough situations. And when he does, they're pretty misguided, overthrown, and it's led to a couple of interceptions on his part. So it's kind of a strange one of how do you take the step up of becoming this better team? You've got the run game. That's great. That's phenomenal. Don't need to touch that. The defense maybe needs another piece or two. I know they've lost a lot of guys last year. They lost Nutzlander last year as a homegrown. They have a good corner in Devin Taylor who they can build off of with American talent. But they're just not an elite unit. You don't think of defense, you don't think of the Raiders. You think more so of their rivals in Vienna, which is kind of a weird one for them. That's not what they would like, I'm assuming.
Absolutely. A couple guys in the chat there. Alex said, nice shirt, Nick. Thanks, brother. Represented, like I said earlier, our greatest export, American football. That's what we got here. Mike Mathis in the chat. So even though N'Kosi Perry was D1, he isn't the guy. Yes. I mean, we can't say concretely if he's the guy or not. There's still a whole second half of the season to play, but being Division I does not equate to having success in European football. You see a lot of guys who played maybe at a little bit lower level in college, were superstars at Division II, that come out here and have way more success than guys who played at big time universities or colleges in the States. Interesting. You touched on it, Matt, at the playoff picture. Raiders, Central Conference, currently sitting at 5-2 now. They're second in the Central Conference, but behind the Surge. Their big rivalry or their big competition for holding on to that spot is going to be the Munich Ravens, who they did beat by 3 points earlier in the year. N'Kosi Perry's first game where he was very, very clutch. Like I said, they're sitting at 5-2, but they could easily go 2-3 in the second half of the season. They've got to play the Surge twice. Once coming up this weekend. They've got to play the Ravens again, who are going to be looking for revenge. And then the Ravens, on the other hand, they're either going to go 9-3 or 8-4. The only challenging game that the Ravens have left is their matchup against the Raiders. So if you look at it right now, the Ravens are a little bit more in a better position looking into the second half of the year to snag that number 2 spot in the Central Conference and sneak into the playoffs. It's going to be a little bit of an uphill battle for the Raiders. What do you think, Matt, right now? I mean, that game, the Raiders-Ravens rematch, is going to be very anticipated. If you had to call it right now, who's going to win that game and who's going to snag the second seed out of the Central?
I'm going to favor the Ravens because they've just come off, we'll get to it in a minute. They're pretty well rested following in that game. They have more consistency as well. You touched on a D1 quarterback and stuff. Chad Jeffries has been in Europe for a while. We know what he's about. And this is also to mention that the Raiders offense isn't built around N'Kosi Perry. It was built for Fulford. It wasn't built for Perry to build into. He's come in late season. I'd like to see him develop more in that area before we give a concrete reasoning. But the Ravens just have players have been there for a while. Tommy was been there for a minute. They've got in Malik Stanley, who is a like-for-like replacement for Michael Castle, in my opinion. Yeah. He's jumped immediately to one of the best receivers in the league. I'm favoring Munich. I'm favoring them quite heavily as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I had to pull the trigger right now and choose that, I'm leaning the same way. That Malik Stanley move, and we'll talk about the Ravens in a little bit. Great move. Great move. Ravens have a little bit more promise for the second half of the season. So the Raiders T-roll unable to get over that purple hump that has been bothering them so much. They drop a loss 27-19. Vienna Vikings looking strong, looking good. One of only 2 undefeated teams left in the league. Now we're going to be moving on to an interesting situation here, chat, and feel free to chime on in and give us your thoughts and opinions. We all know here that there was a forfeit at halftime from the Barcelona Dragons. They're playing the Munich Ravens 50-0 at halftime, and Barcelona elected to not play the second half. Now, the league is investigating the matter and everything that's going on with Barcelona. The league is working very closely with Barcelona and in talks with the owners. But there's a lot of speculation, everything going on right now. So we really don't have anything concrete there. Just the fact that the league is working with the franchise, and Barcelona is going to be playing this weekend. They're going to be playing Madrid, and so we'll be taking some steps forward here. But yeah, this was a little bit of a weird one. You guys feel free to give your thoughts in on this. And Matt, just on the football side of things, what did you see with the Munich Ravens kind of trampling all over the Barcelona Dragons on this one?
Yeah, it was a tough game to kind of look at, when the first half, the imports for the Dragons weren't there. Shout out to the imports that played. Kyle Disa played. I think he might have been the only import that played. There might have been one other one. I might have to, 100% on that one. But shout out to them because they came out, they knew they were probably going to lose and they still played. So that I need to give credit for them for doing so. Munich, Chad looked excellent when he was on the field. 16 for 17, nearly 300 yards, 6 touchdowns. Even a backup, Adoram came in. He had that beautiful throw to Stanley.
Right.
That was gorgeous throw. Absolutely wonderful. Tomo Awewo's back. He got some momentum behind him. Only 3 carries, but got 57 yards and a touchdown. Also affected it with 4 catches and 2 touchdowns himself. So he had a star-studded day. Stanley got a hat trick. We talked about him a minute ago. And he just had the presence that he brings to this offense because first of all, he looks massive. He looks bigger than he did last year.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but I was shocked when I was at the Surge Ravens games on the sideline and seeing Malik Stanley in person. This man is huge, and he's also athletic as hell, big, strong, fast. Big fan of Malik Stanley.
Yes. I said at the start of last year that I firmly believe that Stanley could be a Triple Crown winner in this league.
Yes.
If he's given a full season, and he's an outstanding receiver. Marvin stepped up. They had, only one half to really show what they had, but they still put up 54 points. We can see they've got a good defense. It's improved. They beat up on a bad team, but they go in, no injuries, which is always the thing that's most important. As you said, the league's getting into the actual non-football side of it, but I'm sticking to the football. There were some bright sparks. Shout out to the players that played on Dragons. Munich looked great while they're on the field. A lot to take home and build off of for the upcoming games. They've got an easy schedule. Like you said, they could very easily finish in playoff contention. In games like this, where they're rested, you've got a bye week, come back, they're going to be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, my biggest concern for the Ravens will be with the second half of the season that they're looking at, not so much competition. If they do make it into the playoffs, what they very, very likely could, are they going to be ready to have those competitive games that the playoffs are going to bring? And are they going to be able to perform in this dominant fashion that they're doing against some of the lower end teams? Are they going to be able to bring that swagger and intensity to those more competitive games? That's my big concern with the Ravens, but we will see. And then on the non-football side of things, just so you touched on, man, we got to give kudos to the Dragons players who, with a shitty off the field situation, everything that's going on, these guys coming, suiting up and playing football and showing up. And of course, everything had to be called at halftime, but these guys who are coming out here and putting their bodies on the line in a less than ideal situation. It was cool. At the end of the game, there was a video circulating of Coach Kendall Ellison, the Munich head coach, speaking with both teams, right? Because the Dragons had lost their head coach figure. And so it was cool to see Kendall Ellison kind of addressing just all of these young men, all of these guys who are football players, and talk about sort of the broader picture. Of course, this is a single game right here. It sucks for the Dragons, but we're looking at the broader picture of football as a whole. When you look at football in Europe, it is an interesting sport because it's a little bit smaller right now. It's a niche sport. We're growing. All the fan bases and all of the teams, of course, there are rivalries, but there's a lot of support between franchises and teams for the sport as a whole. And I think what Coach Kendall Ellison did after that game and sort of bringing both teams together and touching on that, I really liked that and kind of focusing and emphasizing this great sport that we're all trying to help grow. I mean, Matt, you and I right now talking about this, being on the show, all you guys in the chat who are here so early on this league. I mean, we're only 4 years in, and there's going to be some bumps and bruises and everything like that. But I really liked seeing that from Coach Ellison, having people like that involved in this league in our sport. I think that was an important thing. But yeah, this one ended up being a bit brutal, and we will see. The league, of course, will be working closely and figuring everything out with the Barcelona Dragons, and hopefully they can figure things out there. It's it, man. They got 2 wins on the year. I mean,
Yeah.
They've got more wins than some other teams.
Absolutely, agreed. Yeah, and like you said, just to add a little bit more to it, it's such a personal league. Like you can message the MVP of the league, and he's probably going to reply to you. If you
Right.
message Tom Brady, he's not going to. Let's be real, he's probably not going to reply. But this is Europe. Everyone kind of is interconnected. Everyone kind of knows everyone. It's a very personal league, and Edison has a great reputation within the league as a leader, as a coach, as a pure football guy. So, like you said, love it.
Yeah. And just a couple people in the chat there. Rodney P said, I think that the NFL went through 59 teams. That's correct. And I touched on this a couple shows ago that when you're starting a league, there's going to be some rocks and bumps and bruises here. 10 of the original 12 teams that the NFL started with no longer exist. So this, we're not saying anything about that about the Dragons, but it's perfectly normal for there to be a little bit of adversity here. And this is something that the league will continue to work with the franchises, the individual franchises, to help them be as healthy as possible. But that is what we have got on that one. I do love that point you made, Matt, that it's a very personal league. And you just like you said, you can message the MVP of the league. The guys right here, fourth down fiasco guys, say players and teams are responding to us, and we're brand new.
Exactly.
And I think everyone kind of working together, whether it's media guys, whether it's players, whether it's the league, whether it's teams, working together to elevate the sport and our league as a whole. And that's what's super important. Marcus, right there. One more thing before I shut up. Football is family. That's what it is, especially in Europe. All right, Matt. Should we move on to the next one?
Got me riled up. That's very American speak to you.
Right up here. So I got this shirt on today. All right. Football. American football. This one, interesting one. A little bit of a heartwarming story, actually, you could say. The Milano Seamen versus the previously undefeated Helvetic Mercenaries. A rainy, cold game. Talk to me about this one, Matt.
Hell yeah, the Mercs got win. I don't care about nothing else. The Mercs got win. I'm happy for Jamal. He's a friend of everyone in the chat and on this channel. We all love Jamal. I was like live streaming or watching this one. I was so happy to see him happy, you know what I mean? But the game was, wet, very wet, very wet. It's tropical. So it was going to be a run heavy game. Aiken got 115 and a touchdown. I believe it was on his birthday, so that's pretty dope. Happy birthday to him.
Happy birthday.
Yep, AFB, he played well. Spiller, again, continuing to be a bit of a breakout rookie player. Defensively, we know they have a good defense. It was weird, the situation they had with their DBs. Very weird. But their front seven of homegrown talent has been solid all year. They've got Sherman's one of the best linebackers that's a homegrown player in the league, in my opinion. He's an extremely good player. You got Folk, you got Kev Cortez, knows not homegrown, but still a European. They have a bunch of guys that are very talented on this team. We knew they could win because they missed 2 field goals against the Dragons and then still lost. But we know that they can win. They've finally got that O off of their scoreboard. But for Milan, this is a very missed opportunity. You had an opportunity to go 4-3, which, at the bottom of that conference would have been important. And Milan aren't going to compete with your Frankfurts or your Washtads, you would assume. So this could have been a very big game for them. Again, quite run heavy. They decided and elected to pass over. It's a little bit drier in their spells. But just kind of, they couldn't find the end zone. They only had 10 points. So went pretty damn good third down efficiency. But it just kind of ended nowhere. The drives just stalled out. They couldn't really get too much going, and they just kind of faded on every single offensive drive.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the chat here, we got the man himself, Carlton Aiken, the birthday boy in there. Welcome, Carlton. Congrats on the win, and extra special getting that on your birthday, man. And yeah, and just the Mercenaries finding a way to get it done. Not as especially pretty game for either team, but finding a way to get it done. And, of course, they've had a lot of off-season or off-the-field adversity as well, the Helvetic Mercenaries. Just we talked about the Dragons. But the players, the guys that are on the field and continue to go out there every single week, and the Mercenaries finally picking up their first win. Massive kudos to them. Way to go, Carlton. Way to keep that motivation and that drive alive. I hope you guys pick up a couple more there. But on the unfortunate side of things, yeah, the Milano Seamen, who had stacked together a couple of wins, and Zachary Bronkhorst settling in a little bit to his European career. He's not incredible for me just yet, but he's improving. I do think he's at the bottom of the league in terms of completion percentage, but he does have 3 wins to his resume, which is more than others can say. But yeah, not enough to get it done today. He also wasn't especially deadly on the ground, which he was last week. And that was kind of the difference maker for them against the Fahervar and Throners last week is Zachary Bronkhorst just taken off. I think he had like 8 or 9 rushes for about 85 yards last week, picking up important first downs. He only had 14 on the ground with 10 attempts. So that was very different this week, but really great to see the Helvetic Mercenaries get that home win in front of the home crowd, a nice rainy football game, and kudos to them. What do you think, Matt? Anything else on that one?
Mercs never die,
Mercs never die. And I hope our boy Jamal, I think Marcus said in there, where's Jamal? Is he still hungover? Man, probably celebrating the Mercenaries' first win. But hey, keep it going, Mercenaries. Keep trucking. Keep fixing that off-field stuff. Keep picking up wins. We love to see it. And good for them. Our lone Swiss franchise moving to 1-5, getting out of that winless category. Then, Matt, this one. So, yeah, we see the final score here. Helvetic goes 16-10. Solid for them. The next game, a Western Conference showdown that's leaving one team feeling really good and one team probably feeling a bit lost. The Frankfurt Galaxy versus the Madrid Bravos. Matt, talk to me about this one.
Galaxy did, they just couldn't they just couldn't get anything done. They Galaxy did. They allowed 10 points per quarter minimum every quarter, which is not good. It's not going to win you football games. Offensively, they're leaning on the pass a lot, and I think they should lean a lot more on the run. They've got a former NFL practice squad running back. I know he's dealt with injuries last season, but Fishback is serviceable, Santos is serviceable, and they're still throwing nearly 40 times a game. It's odd to me to have that. And obviously, Max started the game. Zradka then came in later. We were told in previous, he was a little bit banged up, so he was only going to play if they were losing kind of thing. He came in, threw another pick 6 to Jalen Embry. Is a lot, like you said, lost, I think is a really, really good way to put it, because this was their year, we're not going to be the little brothers anymore. We won our first championship. Then we took a step down. We're getting back to that pedestal. Not happened, not even slightly. They are looking like one of the most disappointing teams in the league. I wasn't buying the hype early in the year, but I thought they would be better than this.
Yeah.
Duncan tore him up as well on the Madrid side. The run game for Madrid has always been on fire. Woody Patterson's back in form after a game or two where he had a little bit less involvement. Now he's getting back up to where we expect him to be. Defensively, they're one of the best units in the league. Pablo Rey is great. Vera got another pick. You know how good he is when it comes to intercepting the ball. Carrasco, Glenna, Iris. There's so many good players in this defense that go unnoticed. So I can't give every single one of them their names. But yeah, this Madrid team is legit. They've proved that they lost against the Ryan Fire, but they also beat the Ryan Fire. I think some people, because they got beaten so badly in that second one, kind of wrote them off as a fluke, including us. We talked about it as well. But they just beat the brakes off a Galaxy who gave Paris some issues a little bit. They gave Ryan some issues. So absolutely, Madrid are still in the competition. And Galaxy, I think, like you say, lost. They need investment on multiple positions, and they kind of need to figure out what they want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, the Galaxy are not a bottom tier team. They still, like you said, they gave trouble to some elite teams like Paris. They're not just getting run over every week, but they're just, they're not clicking, man. And on the Bravo side, they absolutely are. And I think I'm one of the people that needs to maybe walk back a little bit, because I was not calling them a fluke necessarily, but I was saying I don't totally buy the Bravos hype after that first Rhine Fire win. I thought that they were riding high on emotions, and that singular game was a little bit of a fluke. But the Bravos this week put another nail in the belief board for me of, okay, this team is legit and they might actually be contenders. And I'll tell you what, the one play that really sticks out in my mind from this game is the fumble where Bravo scooped it up and pitched the ball back to each other 2 times to score on like the 95-yard touchdown, scoop and score. This to me shows a swagger, a team chemistry, and a connection that is really evident and really apparent with this Madrid Bravos team. I think you don't really make that type of play if you don't have a great kicker, you don't have that confidence, you don't have that swagger, and you don't make that play unless you have that. And that's a huge thing. And it's incredible that this team has that in their first year. I would expect that from a team that's kind of been together for a couple of years, but from a first year team, that's absolutely magical to have. And so that's huge for me. But you touched on it too, man. Like, Frankfurt had more first downs. They had more total plays. They had more yards. But just like the Raiders T-Roll against the Vienna Vikings, they had a lot of turnovers. 3 picks and 1 lost fumble, whereas the Bravos protected the ball. They had no turnovers. It just goes to show you how important that turnover margin is as well, because you're able to really run away with a game without having, more yards or that many more effective plays on offense, but just having that turnover margin is massive.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. But like this is a stat in itself, right? So they have the worst scoring offense in the Western Conference, which includes a 1-4 Cologne team. They got less points than them. They got less points than Munich, who we've also called a disappointing team by half. They've got
Right.
less points than Wroclaw, who we've also called a disappointing team. Like they're hovering around Prague Lions in terms of offensive efficiency. This is a team that's 0-7. This is a team that's had one of the worst offensive lines in the ELF this year. Like the Galaxy are a very confusing team to watch because they'll get into the red zone and then they'll just either fumble it away, throw it away, or give up or miss the kick. Like it's spinning a roulette wheel and betting on green every time you spin a roulette wheel.
Yeah.
Kind of like watching the Galaxy offense. You know it's not going to go in, but you do it because what if it does?
What if it does?
And
That's
that's
a
kind of how
great.
it feels. That's
That's
how
a
it feels
great.
watching offense.
Yeah. And in the chat here, M. Bison said, yeah, Nick, it's okay to admit we were a little bit wrong about the Bravos. These boys are good. And can we also give Duncan his flowers? He had a bad game versus the Fire, but his line didn't help much at all. And then he had a great game. So, yeah, I mean, Duncan, that's a guy we have to give him major props, especially considering the personal adversity he's had this year. And then to come step in and help lead this team to really solidify themselves right now at this point in the season I think is a top 5 team. And so we absolutely have to do that. But yeah, Matt, Frankfurt, I'm looking at Frankfurt's upcoming schedule. They've got Cologne, they've got the Fire again, they've got Hamburg, they've got Cologne, they've got the Bravos, and they've got the Panthers. I mean, they could win 4 of those games. Do you think their season's over? Are they out of the playoff conversation?
I'm going to say yes, just because the other teams in that conference are so good. They get 4 more wins. They're still only going to have 6, which is still not,
Yeah.
an elite one. I would like to see that Wroclaw game. That is really one that interests me because both of those teams have been quite disappointing. And the game that we saw them, they were also both trying to lose that one.
They were
So
trying.
that was a weird game in itself. More of betting on green on that one, but they can beat Cologne. Cologne are not great. They're 1-4, but it's that they're beating teams in the bottom of the barrel, and then as soon as they play up against Rhine Fire, they're probably going to get sent back down. I think that they're really going to struggle. I think they can pick up a couple wins on that schedule, but they're just kind of hovering around the midfield for me.
Yeah. Pretty disappointing, especially considering the offseason moves, the offseason hype, the talent that's on this roster. And we actually have some breaking news right now. Luke Zarodka, speaking of the Galaxy, he is being placed on IR. This is breaking news right now. We saw he did not start the game. Moritz Mack was playing for the whole first half, and then Luke ended up coming in the second half because things were not going well. And looks like Luke now got injured during that time or increased his injury in some way, and he is placed on IR. So the Galaxy are going to have to make a quarterback move, Matt. That is interesting. What do you think about Luke being placed on IR?
I mean, he hasn't been great. Yeah, a lot of turnovers. Well, I mean,
Yeah,
that's pretty obvious. Fumbles in the red zone a couple times, bad decision making, a multiple pick sixes. We knew that he's kind of a boom or bust quarterback, and a lot of people don't like that term because they think it's a bit, pessimistic.
right.
But he can definitely boom. But there's definitely some instances where he's a bit of a gunslinger, and I think this offense just needs a bit more stability. They haven't found their offensive identity, and I think they need something a bit more stable. So I think that's unfortunate. We never want to see injuries, but I think maybe the Galaxy could try and find someone that can deliver a bit of steady the ship a little bit.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so that's breaking news, and they're in the chat. Fourth down fiasco says the return of Epler. Interesting. Shelton Epler, who did a great job for a few games, is currently a free agent. I don't know. So it's so interesting, Matt, with all of the movement. A lot of quarterback. We have a crazy quarterback carousel this year.
We do.
And we'll keep our eye on Frankfurt, see what their quarterback move is. Do they go with Moritz Mack or what do they do? We'll see. But that one is big news coming out of Frankfurt and the Western Conference. All right, moving east, checking out the Berlin Thunder versus the Fehervar Enthroners. Not such an exciting game, and Matt, I'd like to get your thoughts on it. But then I would like to look a little bit at more of the broader picture of the story of the Berlin Thunder and what is the second half of their season going to look like. But Matt, for now, give me some of your thoughts on this Eastern Conference matchup.
They ran the ball. They ran the ball a lot, which is not usually what we're used to seeing with
They
Berlin.
don't do that.
They don't do that. That's not their MO. That's not what they do. Sullivan, not quieter game, but wasn't as needed because they had a run game that was actually working. They ran it nearly like 40 times, which is for Berlin is like, am I watching the Berlin Thunder? Or am I watching someone
Insane.
else?
Yeah.
They had 6 rushing touchdowns, which I'm pretty sure is more than they had in the last like 3 years. So
Yeah.
this is pretty different for me. I was watching the game back today, and it's like, am I watching the right game? I generally had to check if I was watching the right game because it was that confusing to watch. Sullivan, like I said, a little bit quieter. Schultz, massive game, 154 on the ground, 3 touchdowns. Peter got a touchdown. Jackson got multiple just because he's Aaron Jackson, kind of scoring literally every single way. Aaron Jackson is a machine. Defensively, we know what Berlin are. We didn't expect the Enthroners to have much for them, and they didn't. The Enthroners were poor once again. Literally, if we look at the short highlights and the extended highlights, it's all Berlin. There wasn't very many Enthroners highlights about this game.
I mean, you look at even just the stats. Fehervar had just 4 first downs to Berlin's 26. So really lopsided game here. I'm curious, Matt, you touched on the run game of Berlin, something we've been very critical of them, and I think rightfully so for the majority of the season. Had a lot of success through the air with Jacob Sullivan. He's been leading the league in passing yards, but they've been unable to get that running game going. We finally saw it this week with all those rushes and all those rushing yards, but it is against Fehervar. Do you think that this is sort of a one-off, or do you think that this is Berlin finally establishing their running game heading into the second half of the season?
I think it was their time to experiment, and I think they grabbed the opportunity with both hands. It's a time to get the run game going, try different things. Not everything has to be passed in 100 times a game. You can try different stuff out. I think they did that. I'm happy that they did that. Their offensive ranks, they are still 5th, for rushing, which is pretty good, which I wouldn't have expected going into this numbers. But they've got the best scoring offense. They've got a really good passing offense. Obviously, like you said, Sullivan's had an amazing year. I'm sure Galaxy are looking back at that pretty enviously.
Yeah.
Total yards gained, they're 4th in the league. The rushing defense is actually not great, which is ironic. They kind of struggle with the rush sometimes and can't stop the rush in others. They're 4-3. They're 2nd in the East, and the East is a notoriously poor conference to play in because you've got Lions, you've got Droners, which you can kind of chalk up as 4 wins for Berlin during the year. They're being better than Wroclaw. If they can beat Vienna, which I'm not saying they will, I'm just saying if they
Yeah.
could, that might be one of the most entertaining games of the year because Berlin have a high-powered offense. Berlin have a serviceable
Yeah.
defense. They've got one of the best, defensive player of the year nominee, and he's a 2-time defensive player of the year, Carl Kitchens. Spillum, who me and you are both massive fans of.
Big.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Spillum. They got Emil Forvda, they got these young guys, they've got these experienced guys. That defense has been the same for years. If they can just shore up the interior of that defense, I don't see any reason why they can't challenge the big teams. They've got losses. The loss to Voshav has aged not great in hindsight,
Yeah.
but I think they can take that one back off of them personally.
I mean, so do I, man. And I'll get back to Berlin here in a second. Somebody in the chat, it's past now. I can't see who said. I think it was Thomas Lustig said, a little bit disappointed in Robitaille. Thought he would have more of an impact out there in Hungary. It is a little bit of an unfortunate situation. Doesn't have so much talent around him. I think we as fans of the league are missing a little something there because he does have superstar potential. And we saw some of that, especially in the ELF championship game last year. So I agree with you a little bit there. Thomas, I believe you said that. But back to Berlin, Matt, and we're talking about them out in the East. Okay, so they're sitting at 4-3 right now.
Yes.
They've lost by a total of 8 combined points to 2 of the top 3 teams in the league, the Rhine Fire and the Vienna Vikings, right? And they were leading them both in the fourth quarter. Very winnable games, just well within their grasp. Looking at the second half of their season, and like you said, they're currently sitting at second in the East. Looking at the second half of their season, they got Paris, they've got Vienna, they've got Paris again, Wroclaw, and the Fire again. They're sort of the opposite of Munich. The second half of their schedule is very, very tough, but they have shown against good teams that they can be in it. They've just not been able to push it over the edge and come away with wins. What do you think? Do you think that with this second half of the season that Berlin has, with what we've seen with them so far, able to hang around with these great teams and even lead them, are they going to be able to pull off wins against some of these good teams? Like, will they beat Paris one time? Will they be competitive against Vienna again and possibly have that go the other way? What do you think, man?
It's such a strange one, right? Because you can split into 2 different ways. You can say, oh, they're 4-0 against these 2 teams in the conference, but they're 0-3 when playing teams that are actually, real contenders.
Oh.
It's such a strange kind of conundrum that they find themselves in. Paris are such a hard team to beat, especially with Edwards being on MVP form. Vienna. Wroclaw, you can probably take that win back, and then Fire the Fire. So, like, that's literally a cold walk where it's got to stay calm. Don't let it get to your head. Just try and stay focused. I think they can pick up maybe 2 wins. I can kind of see them challenging Paris, but it depends if they can figure out that second half because that's still not being like an overwhelming positive in their game. That second half is still an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. But they did look pretty solid this week against the winless Enthroners, finishing that one 47-0. Finally getting a little bit of that run game going. So we will see what the second half of this looks like for them. Moving on to the team we were just talking about a bit, Paris Musketeers. They played the Hamburg Sea Devils. Paris absolutely showing themselves as a contender. Second-year team that's doing almost everything right. Zach Edwards, one of our favorite players in the league, one of the faces of the league, another great game. Matt, talk to me about this one.
You touched on it a little bit ago. I wanted to wait for it and bring it back up now. D1 quarterback sometimes in the answer, and Zach Edwards is exactly the player that I would bring up to talk about that because he was not a D1 guy, and he's just eclipsed 10,000 yards. First ever to do it. Congratulations. 100 touchdowns. First time to do it. Congratulations. Multiple firsts for the ELF history. And he's been in the league forever. He got 5 touchdowns, so he was magnificent. He was magic, some might say.
Magic
run game, yeah, exactly. Run game slower, but still fine. Only 23 for Ugman. Valumbo got 8. Mitchell and Tekian got 7 each on the Jets. Passing game has been electric all year. That defense, we talked about Dales and his 4.2 speed. That's hard to cover with. He's
Fast man alive.
I think that Chandler Jones might be one of my favorite American rookies of the year. He probably is my favorite American rookie. I know we don't have a rookie of the year for Americans or like a newcomer of the year, I would definitely put Chandler Jones up for that. He got another pick. He extends his streak. Dejan Gomez is one of the best linebackers. They got a great interior. Paris is just built to win a championship. They destroyed Hamburg. It was close in the first half. I think they were doing what the Kansas City Chiefs do, and they're like, we can kind of take off the gas for a bit. We'll try in the second half. They tried in the second half. They kind of beat the brakes off of them. It wasn't really hard for them at all. They stopped the run to a moderate success. If you look at the yards, it looks a little bit. Look at the yards per carry, and it's a different story. And Hamburg kind of looked at, maybe it's just me, a little bit undisciplined. Like even with the touchdown with Sal, that you got a former NFL practice squad guy in Mills, and he's not touching down players. Like,
right,
for
sloppy.
me, yeah, exactly. And they got blown out. It was quite easy for Paris. They cruised to a win the second half, and it wasn't really an issue. I still think that they're one of the best teams in the league, and I think they give the surge and they need to beat Ryan. They give Ryan issues. They give Vienna issues. They're a stacked team.
They absolutely are a stacked team, and just a lot of good things going on in Paris. Of course, Zach Edwards with 5 total touchdowns, 3 through the air, 2 on the ground. Just like you said, bringing back that magic that we were missing last year. And I said this a couple weeks ago. He got that nickname in his Barcelona year, where he had that magic going on, him and Kyle Sweet. In last year, first year in Paris, a lot of things to kind of bring together. Hard to have all of that magic in your first year with a brand new organization. But now that they've got a year under their belt, the magic is coming back, and we've been seeing that this year. Paris in a great position right now. On the other side of things, Hamburg, Javarian Smith, we saw the news. He has been released. You've said, Matt, one of the most difficult quarterbacks in the league to analyze. So hard to get a picture of what kind of player he really is. His completion percentage is very low. It's about 50%. Not good. But he showed flashes of just incredible plays. But then he showed flashes of bad decisions and not good plays. Hamburg ultimately deciding to part ways with him. What are your thoughts on this, on Hamburg getting rid of Javarian Smith?
I mean, it's weird. He's a splash quarterback. The offense has struggled, but I don't think it's entirely the quarterback's fault. I don't think you can put a Band-Aid on a stab wound, with that offensive line. It's not a great offensive line. I do think they need reinforcement on that, because you could put any quarterback in, they're going to struggle with a bad offensive line. The weapons have been average. I know Jarvis is a monster, but apart from Jarvis, no one has separated themselves. I know that receiver got 250 odd yards, but he's not what you would call, Harlan Kofi or Lewis Geyer or Yannick Meyer or some of the weapons that the other players have. No disrespect to him. But they lack a second receiver because Landstrom hasn't broke out this year like people expected him to. They lack an offensive line. Their run game hasn't really been cooking because the offensive line is poor. I don't think all the weight's on Smith. Granted, I didn't think Smith was an MVP favorite or in that caliber of conversation. But Landstrom tore his ACL. There we go. So he's been out. They haven't had a guy come in and really have himself be as the number 2 receiver. So that's been hard for them to really overcome. And, you can't just switch quarterbacks and it kind of feels like a lateral move,
Yeah. Interesting. And we'll talk about, we're going to have a couple of little signing center, I think, after we finish up these games. We'll talk about it a little bit more. But yeah, lateral move is probably a great way to describe it. So anyway, this game ends. Paris Musketeers stomping on the Hamburg Sea Devils 41-18. Paris just taking another step towards being in great position come playoff time. Looking good. And they are now at 4-1. Moving on to the Wrocław Panthers and the Prague Lions. This was an interesting one, a little bit closer than I thought it would be. And the return of the man himself, Matty Ice, back in Wrocław. After Wrocław had a little bit of drama last week, parting ways with their head coach, Christensen, and barely beating the Prague Lions. What are your thoughts on this one, man?
Weird game. Weird game.
Right?
Kind of boring because it was 2 quarterbacks that have just come into new systems, 2 LFA quarterbacks that have just come into new systems that weren't built for them. As I said with Nkosi, this is not an offensive built around him. And you look at Matty Ice. Matty Ice was great last year. This offense was built for Steve Duncan, who is a completely different quarterback. And then you got Uri Ben, who is a completely different quarterback.
Yes.
So you have to maybe allow a dip in numbers for him to expect him to kind of go up when he gets more used to the playbook. Perkins, although the stats don't tell the whole story, I actually kind of like what he brought to that team. He was a
Okay.
bit of a dog, bit angry, played in that kind of way of frustrated, and I like that. Offensive line though, still very poor. Running game non-existent. 8 carries between the two running backs and 2 yards, 2 yards between 8 carries, not great. Joseph Janota finally getting the recognition he deserves as a great receiver. That defense, I've been saying that Prague defense is very talented. People haven't been listening to me. Borkovic, Daniel Wright's back, and they're playing him at corner. They should be playing at safety. He's a natural safety. He ain't a corner. He can play corner. He's an Alabama starting safety, though, so you play him at safety would be better. But that's me going on tangents. They have a great defense. Voslav have been disappointing offensively all year, and they have a great defense. So it's kind of a bit of a chess game of defensive stands. AJ is still AJ. This was incredible. Amazing. A bit of a battle. Neither offense could really get started, and both defenses held out. So it was quite a slow tempo game.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are just getting breaking news right now. News out of Frankfurt. We just learned about Luke 15 minutes ago being placed on IR. The Frankfurt Galaxy have signed new quarterback Matthew McKay, played at North Carolina State, Montana State, and Elon. 24 years old, is a big dude, 6'4". Matt, I think 220 pounds or so.
Big dude.
You got any info on him on this new quarterback?
I know he had some trial stuff at Dallas, which is pretty interesting. He looks like he has a kind of an odd throwing release, which I'm intrigued to see when he comes into the league. Good arm velocity. Looks like he can really throw the ball out because arm power isn't just about distance and also speed. It's two different things. Looks like he has some zip on the ball, which I like. And he kind of is a similar frame to Luke, so that's pretty interesting. Kind of a similar maybe play style. We'll see if he's a little bit more conservative with the turnovers, but seems like a pretty good move to bring in someone who is very similar to the guy you built the system around.
Yeah, true. I mean, because we just saw, like with the Panthers who have Matty Ice in there playing in a system that is for a totally different type of quarterback. So we'll see. I mean, if you watch a little bit of tape and you can find some similarities with him and Luke, so maybe he can plug into that Frankfurt Galaxy offense and maybe even add a little bit more dynamic playmaking ability and breathe a little bit of new life into Frankfurt. But that's a big signing coming out of there. Former Division I quarterback, which we talked about. Mixed reviews on that fact of things, but who knows? Every individual is different. Matthew McKay coming in, hopefully can save the Frankfurt Galaxy season. But that is interesting breaking news. Marcus says, I already don't like him. My ex-wife went to North Carolina State. And this is the type of analysis we do on this show. We have very good, deep analysis on football facts. And Marcus, thank you for adding that for us. Sorry to hear about that. But anyway, that's big breaking news. Back to the Eastern Conference matchup, Panthers at Prague. You touched on it, man. Prague's defense is good. They held Brzozowski, one of the better running backs in the league, to 50 yards on a good handful of carries. So they really did. But the offensive line, not good for Prague. They gave up 11 sacks. That's just going to be tough for anybody. But it will be interesting to see how Matty Ice settles into this Panthers season this year. Obviously, he had some success last year, and a lot of people were calling to have him back. Matt, I just wonder, man, what if the Panthers had just stuck with Steven Duncan? What if they had just rode it out for, that one or two bad games, so a couple bad decisions? What do you think?
It would have been interesting, right? We're kind of going to get left with the what if. It's one of the many what ifs we have with this league when it comes to quarterbacks. But what I'm thinking also is Tony Tate, I believe, is also a free agent. So we could see that reunited.
He is.
Matt Cole's had a lot of injury issues, and Norwood was good. Norwood got two touchdowns, I think, on the day. But Tony Tate, Matty Ice, that's some stuff I can't get enough of. So if that was happening again, I would be mad at it.
I saw some posts on Instagram. That would be an awesome reuniting, but we will see what happens there out in the East. This one finishes at 14-3 for the Panthers. Little bit closer and more competitive than people probably expected. Prague still showing some steps. They're still working. They're trying to get that first win. We saw Helvetic get their first win. We'll see if Prague can't get theirs next week, actually, in the battle of the unbeatens. They're playing Enthroner, so they'll have their best chance. But anyway, moving on to our last game of the week, the reigning champ Rhine Fire playing the Cologne Centurions. The Rhine Fire finally back at their big home stadium they're playing in all last year. This stadium, to me, gives the Rhine Fire a confidence and a swagger that really makes them seem like a big-time team, and I think it helps elevate them, and we saw a pretty dominant performance from them. Matt, what are your thoughts on here?
Violent game. 62 isn't. Oh, that just sounds bad to say defensively. Like you say, though, I think they're a home team. They play so well in that stadium. And they beat Cologne by 62 last year as well in that same stadium, which is incredibly impressive. 3 runners with over 100 yards. I'm not sure if that's ever happened in ELF history.
Unbelievable.
But, Glenn's Glenn. This is actually considered an off day for him because he only got 116 yards and 4 touchdowns. Sergi got 150 on a touchdown. McKnight taking jet sweeps as a running back, as a receiver. He got 106. Need a quarterback. They took Jay out and put the backup in, save injury issues. Neither of them really had to throw the ball much, and they still had 4 touchdowns. I think 13 passes in total. Easy win for them offensively. Defensively, they showed out. They've got such a good defense anyway. It's amazing. Like, Marlo Sean is such a great sign of that defense. I'm a massive fan of him. Downcore started to pick up a couple of sacks, a little bit slower at the start of the year. It's got consecutive games now with some sacks. Cologne, though, still rooted to the bottom of that. Such a tough division. I would like to have seen them play some people outside the division and be a bit more competitive, because they got some things, but
they do, man.
Not enough for the Rhine,
Yeah, that's the thing. And we said that on shows before. What would it look like if the Centurions were in the Eastern Conference or the Central Conference? Obviously, doesn't make sense geographically for you geography lovers out there. But just what if, would they be a 500 team? Maybe. I think very, very possibly. Isaiah Weed going for 100 through the air and 100 on the ground, showing his ability with the legs. But just, yeah, the Rhine Fire just in a different class, and I think they're finally kind of starting to hit their mid-season stride a little bit. I know that their passing game is still not clicking, but the run game is incredible. What do we say? Matt Bison said the Fire went from looking like the ELF's version of The Greatest Show on Turf to the mid-90s Nebraska Cornhuskers. The only run formation they haven't used is the wishbone. They might as well start doing it. Get the Rhine Fire a wing T wishbone, because they're running the hell out of the ball. I mean, Matt, that's insane. 3 guys with 100 yards rushing on the ground. Glenn Tunga, who is quite possibly the MVP of the week, not even the leading rusher on his team.
Yeah.
Pretty funny.
It's insane. I mean, had 18 rushing first downs. 18 rushing first downs.
That's quite impressive.
That is quite impressive.
Yeah. This one just a steamroll. The Fire really clicking on the grounds. I do think, though, that they do have to figure out their passing game for the second half of the season when they start to play some better defenses. If they face the Vienna Vikings or the Stuttgart Surge in the playoffs with these elite defenses, they cannot be so one-dimensional. They've got to figure out the passing game through the air. I still hold out hope and think that they will. I think that they're just a little bit in a rut. I think Jadrian has shown that he has the ability to be an elite passer when the conditions are a little bit better, and maybe has some more better protection and feel more comfortable back there. But that's something they got to figure out for the second half of the season. But yeah, Rhine Fire, they're looking pretty solid, man.
Yeah. I mean, even Jay, though, he went 7 for 9, and then the backup went 4 for 4. They just weren't required to pass the ball that much because the running backs run a madness. They went to third down 4 times.
Jeez, that's a crazy stat.
They didn't really need to, didn't need to throw it. If Glenn's just gonna be running first downs, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
No need. And then we see Glenn Tunga with a 4 touchdown day, leading the Fire to a 62-9 stomping of the Cologne Centurions, a victim of being placed in that devastatingly difficult Western Conference. In another universe, Cologne, in another universe, another worlds, would have had a better record. But here we look at the standings sitting after week 7. Only 2 undefeated teams left: Vienna Vikings and the Stuttgart Surge. It's interesting. The Vikings are 7-0, while the Surge have had 2 byes. They're 5-0. Matt, what is jumping out to you on the standings this week?
I think the gap between the first 3 and the bottom 3 of the West, that's the big thing. You got 6-1, 4-1, 4-1, and then drop off. That's the big thing for me that I'm noticing. Also, the Prague versus Euronics game we got next week, 0-7, 0-6. One of them has to win. Prague have never won a game in the ELF.
Yeah.
This could be the one. I'm absolutely going to tune in for that one because I think that could be history. That could be history.
For sure, man. I'm actually thrilled for that game. One of these teams is going to walk away with a win, and I think they're kind of evenly matched up. Could end up being an exciting game. For me, what's interesting is the middle of the Central Conference. We talked about it, the Munich Ravens and the T-Roll Raiders, who, when we look at a playoff projection right now, it looks like it will be 3 teams from the Western Conference, 2 from the Central, and 1 from the Eastern Conference. So these teams, the Ravens and the Raiders, are battling for that number 2 spot. Of course, the Raiders sitting 2 games ahead of the Ravens right now. But we touched on it with the schedule that remains for the second half of the season. It looks like the Ravens have a clearer path to sneaking into the playoffs in that second spot in the Central. That's what's interesting to me. Love to see Helvetic get out of the winless column and get that first win there. And I think that's kind of what sticks out to me. That Western Conference, top of the Western Conference, man, going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Brutal.
Oh, good football teams, man. Some good football teams. All right. Now, we're going to take a look here at some of our standout performances of the week, guys. In the chat, give us your suggestions for who should be nominated for MVP. We're going to walk away from this show with 2 MVP nominations, and then everyone will be able to vote on social media, on Instagram, for this week's MVP. So let's bring up here. We got a couple of graphics of some of the highlight performances. My man, Christoph Viz, the homegrown linebacker, 8 tackles, 4 sacks. We do not give enough credit to defensive players, particularly linebackers. I am not coming at this from a place of bias because I played linebacker. Okay, maybe a little bit. We got to give a shout out here to the man Vis. 4 sacks is an insane stat, and he is getting nominated here, or one of the players highlighted this week. Matt, who do we got next?
Let me wait for I'm going to go for Glenn Tonga. That's what I'm going to go for. Glenn Tonga, 17 rushes. He was outstanding again, 116 yards, 4 touchdowns. That was just the cream of the crop. You know, he's miles ahead of absolutely everyone in terms of rushing. This was an off day for him, and he's still in the MVP of the week discussion. I think he's been here pretty much every single week. It's Glenn Tonga. He's going to run through absolutely everyone. He's a bowling ball. No one has figured out how to stop him, and Cologne are just the latest people to add to that list.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in the chat here, ELFpedia and Fourth Down Fiasco are saying Ben Straight, who we touched on earlier, 2 picks, another great defensive performance. I don't know if we have a graphic for him, but that's a great name to throw in here. And then our third graphic, we've got Maxie. Pull it up for us. The man himself, Zach Edwards. Very solid day. 20 for 26, 213 yards, 3 touchdowns through the air, 2 on the ground, another 50 or so rushing yards, just creating and producing offense and points for one of the best teams in the ELF. Another great one. And then in the chat, we've got also, who else do we got? Oh, Schultz. Yep. You guys are saying Schultz. Yeah. He should also be nominated. And then our director, Maxie, said, how do we miss Ben Straight? We don't have a graphic for Ben Straight, but he should probably be nominated as well. Chat, we got to decide on 2 names here that are going to be the official nominations. Matt, are you settled on one that you want to go with? Oh, wait a second. I think you might be out. Hold on, chat. If I think Matt's out, we're not entirely sure. Give us a second. I can hear Matt, but I don't know if you guys can.
There we go.
She'll be back.
Back again. I mean, I'm excited. I'm going to go for Zach Edwards. I see Sven Barron back in the chat too. Big man touchdowns do not go unrecognized. Big man touchdowns deserve praise. But I gotta go Zach Edwards, man. He got 5 touchdowns, looked incredible. Beat the brakes off of a decent team. 20 for 26 as well, so accurate one doing so. Did it on the ground, did it on the air. He was phenomenal.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's tough to argue that. In the chat, we got a lot of guys going for Aiken, which they did sneak away with that first win. I don't know if statistically though I can give him the nomination for the MVP. I'm going defense, and I'm trying to decide between Straight and Vis. I mean, chat, what's more impressive, 2 picks or 4 sacks? That's tough. Chat, let me know what you think on that. Matt, what do you think? What's more impressive?
I'm a DB, man. I know you're a linebacker, but I play DB. And I like Benjamin Straight a lot. I agree that he is very underrated. So I would probably go for 2 picks. It turns the ball over, man. That's a big thing.
That's true. It's a tough one, man. It is a tough one. You know what? Part of me really wants to go with the man Viz, but I think the win over the Raiders was a little bit more impressive, and I think a big difference in that game was that turnover margin. It was 4-0 in the turnover margin, and 2 of those coming from Ben Straight himself and helping the Vienna Vikings defeat a very, very strong Raiders team. It's a rivalry game. I do think that had a little bit more impact. I'm going my nominee, Ben Straight, 2 picks. Got to go with the man right there. Coach Kalaikai, if you're watching, I know you're happy about that one. You said he doesn't get enough credit. Here he is getting some credit right now. So those are, that's a good point also. People in the chat, 4 sacks against a 0-win team, or 4 sacks out of 11 total sacks. You're right. You guys are very right. We do love our linebackers, but now that you guys have made this argument, it is not as impressive as the 2 picks. Okay.
One of pick 6 too.
Was one a pick 6? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it might have been, because he got the weird. It was a weird one where it deflected back into him. I think it might have been a pick 6.
So that's easily. I'm going Ben Straight. Give the defense some love. So those are our 2 nominees for MVP, and you guys can vote on social media there to give the deserving player the accolades. Great performances from these fellas. We got an exciting week coming up, Matt. We were looking at earlier some really exciting games. I know kind of some lopsided ones this week that can happen. I mean, we had an incredible week a couple weeks ago where 7 of the 8 games were down to the wire, and sometimes we have just a little bit less exciting ones. Which one of these coming up, Matt, for this week are you most excited about?
It's quite a few, right? I think I'll go for one on each day. So the first day, I'm going to go for the battle of the winless teams. One of them has to win. So one's always got to go, but it's usually the other way around. But today is for wins. In Throners, Prague, one of them has to win. That's the big thing. That's the selling point. That's a unique selling point. I'm excited to see what happens with that one. Like we saw with Milan and Throners, sometimes the teams that want it more, and like the lower end teams, provide more entertaining football. On the Sunday, I'm going to go for Berlin versus Paris, because Berlin need that playoff run. They need to beat these teams. They got a hell of a schedule, as we talked about, coming up. Paris also need this win if they're going to want to try and get into the conversation for winning the conference. They need they cannot really decline a number 2 seed. That is still very much in a range of possibility, maybe a 3 seed. They need that. So both teams need wins. Both teams need to have maybe a higher level team on their win column. I think that is an exciting one.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you on that Berlin versus Paris. And then M. Bison in the chat said it's Magic Zach versus Jacob Sullivan. 2 very good quarterbacks who have been around in this league. 2 guys that we talk about as being premier passers in this league. And that's going to be a very, very interesting one. Can Berlin finish a game against a good team? This is going to be a massive test for them. I am expecting a tight game, but I'm very excited about that one. I'm also very excited about the Stuttgart Surge versus the Raiders T-Roll. So I'm flying back to Germany on Saturday, and I get in late, and then the following morning I'm driving down from Frankfurt all the way to Tyrol to watch this game and film it and see it in person. One of the greatest stadiums we have in the European League of Football, that stadium in the Alps there. So I'm very, very excited about that one. So I'd say those 2 are my 2 favorites. Oh, that's our show, Matt. That's what we got. Yeah, another fun.
That was a good one.
Yeah, another fun show.
Even with the American, Sure.
You know I had to do it, and it's in celebration of our great sport. Everybody in the chat, guys, thank you so much for joining us. You guys, you don't know how much you add to the show and give us a little bit to bounce off of. Even when I was trying to decide my MVP, you guys gave me some great perspective that I didn't even think about. So thank you guys to all of you in the chat. Matt, absolute pleasure talking ELF football with you, brother.
Thank you very much. Pleasure as always. It's a great time every time.
Hell yeah. All right, everybody. We will see you on Thursday, which we'll be talking about this upcoming weekend a little bit more. Have a great day and enjoy. Peace.
Bye.